If you're not enjoying what you're seeing of your life, let that be your wake-up call to start making a change. And to start making a change, start leaning into the things that you value. Make yourself be different than every other leader out there. Guide people in the way that's going to best serve them and give you a stronger connection with the people that you're working with. And you're going to end up feeling more fulfilled at the end of the day too, because they are going to appreciate your guidance.
What does it feel like when onboarding, payroll, compliance, and even IT access all run through one platform? It feels like everything finally works together and HR finally has room to scale. Deal brings global people operations into one place. So new hires start strong, workflows stay compliant, and teams move faster. See it in action at del.com/nickdayhr. Welcome back to the HR L&D podcast. Now imagine surviving not one, but multiple near-death experiences and coming back with a message that could completely transform how we live, how we connect, how we lead ourselves at work. You see, the key to unlocking human potential isn't just in strategy or skill, although I know they're things we talk about a lot on this show, but it's also in soul alignment. And I tell you all, my listeners, this is very close to my heart. And today we're going to explore how intuition, resilience, and purpose can help every single leader that listens to this show turn your pain, which we all have, just be more kind, into real power. Now, if you're new to the show, welcome. Please remember to click subscribe. Please remember to follow. Most importantly, I'd love it if you could share this episode with a colleague, a friend, someone who you think could benefit so we can really drive the power and the influence of human resources worldwide. I'm your host. My name is Nick Day. I'm the CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. We're a specialist human resources recruiter. But today, most importantly, my guest is Andrea Lynn. Now, she is an intuitive mindset coach, a speaker. She does some wonderful videos on YouTube and all the links will be in my show notes. But she's also the host of a quite fantastic podcast called Wake Up Your Soul. And after surviving not one, but multiple near-death experiences, more which I'm sure we'll find out during the course of today's episode, she's discovered how mindset and intuition and self-awareness and trauma, how we can do all of these things and move them into a place of real triumph. So without further ado, welcome Andrea to the HR L&D podcast. It's an absolute privilege to have you with me today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. I'm excited to share my story and I'm hoping I get to hear a little bit of yours. I don't know if you'll dive into it, but I'm curious now.
Well, it'll be interesting, guys. If you do and I share, it's not something I've ever shared publicly before. So maybe it'll be a first. We'll see. But look, before we jump into that, let me ask my first question. What does the word human resources mean to you?
To me, I would say human resources is when you're looking out for the greater good, the people that are working with you and trying to help them feel like they're valuable to the company.
Well, great place to start. It's pretty hard not to argue with that. Now, I mentioned in the introduction that you've had not one, but multiple near-death experiences. And I don't want to suddenly dive straight into that, but I know if I give that as an intro, people are going to be wondering, what were they? How did it change your life? And we know that it is the experiences that we have that can change our course. So tell us a little bit more about your story. What's brought you to here to this show and also what brought you to your wonderful podcast as well, because it's all kind of founded around that beginning, I guess.
Yeah, I always talk to people and I say we don't really know or understand the other side of things until we've really been there. We have to have that contrast in things. And that's one of them. For me, I have lived and I have died. And so I have seen both sides of things, and having that perspective and having myself really have to face the fact that my life could be gone in an instant. And at such a young age, I was just 19 actually when it first started happening. And then it continued to happen where I would just completely flatline. It looked like I was passing out, but what was happening was my heart was completely stopping. There was no electrical signal at all. And so there was no heartbeat. And I flatlined at Stanford when I was doing a tilt table test. And that's where they were able to discover what was happening when I was outside of the hospital. And they saw that for 26 seconds, I had no heartbeat at all, no electrical signal. And they said even the paddles weren't going to restart my heart. They didn't even know if the drugs would. And they were reaching for drugs to try to restart it. And I always say, by the grace of God, it restarted and it came back. And then they ended up giving me a pacemaker so that I could continue to live, essentially, and not have my heart stop on me. And this is where kind of the beginning of that intuition started to step in. I think after that, experience, I started to quiet my mind a little bit more and start diving into some deep reflections. And before the surgery for the pacemaker, I remember thinking today's not the day. And I even told the surgeon that. I said, we don't have to do it today. We can wait. And he said, no, like, we're doing this, which he probably thought, I'm crazy. Why are you saying this? But he was running a little bit late, and his energy seemed a little bit off, and he didn't seem like his mind was in the right place. And I mean, this is something we can obviously dive into with your audience, is knowing when your employees' minds are not in the right place, and maybe today's not the day for the conversation. But to go back to my experience, I felt like today was not his day. And so I even told him that, and he said, no, we're doing it. So we did the surgery. And then it was about, I think it was 3 weeks later or so, or no, I think I went on for 3 months. It went on for a long time where I was in excruciating pain. They couldn't figure out why. And what they came to find out was the pacemaker wire had come loose. It had pierced all the way through the heart and into the lung. And it was continuing to pace me. Yeah. So it was continuing to pace my heart. Well, one of them was, because there's 2 leads. And so the one lead that was in my heart could sense when I needed the pacing. So it would turn on the whole device. So then it was shocking me in the lung and the heart. And that was excruciating, but nobody understood this. And I've always had, yes, a tougher mindset and a push through, find a way kind of person. And so I thought, well, I'm just kind of being a baby here. I'm going to keep pushing. And so I did. And to share a little bit about my mindset, I was in excruciating pain, and I was in college at the time. And I remember thinking, well, I can stay home and sit in bed or on the couch and rest, or I can go to school and keep getting my credits, because otherwise I might not pass this semester for being in class. And so I ended up putting my little butt in my seat, and I got my credits for being in class. I probably didn't take in anything. I was in so much pain, but that was my mindset. And that's always been my mindset, to think about choices and options and the outcome. And for me, it was like, either way, I'm in pain, but what's going to serve me best? And it served me best to just go get that credit. So I did. And then eventually I went to the hospital, where they discovered that my lungs had filled with blood, and they realized that the wire had come loose and was in my lungs. So I went on for weeks and weeks like that, because they had no idea why I was in pain. And so once they did, I had to have surgery to pull it out. And I remember the doctor coming in, and again, this wasn't near death as the other experiences, but he did come in and say that I may not make it through the surgery, because he said, what happens is we are going to pull out this wire. And he said, the heart is either going to just close right up, or we're going to pull it out and you're just going to start bleeding out. And he said, in that case, we're going to cut you open. You're going to wake up with, big incision. If I wake up, he said, but they would go in and perform surgery on my heart. But I remember the first thing I did when I woke up was this. I was like, did I get sliced open? And I didn't. And that was also something I look back on thinking, why did I care? Why did I care? So there've been a lot of life moments that have taught me a lot of things. When you really are faced with very severe situations like that, and you can reflect on what really, really matters, I think we can start to bring a lot more happiness into our lives. And it's the same thing when you're managing people, right? What really matters? Do we need to let some of these things go that we think we need to micromanage? Possibly.
I think there's a lot. I mean, my brain is now firing. All the neurons are going with everything you've just mentioned. I think the first thing that came to mind is I guess it's a cliche, but when you hear a cliche, there's usually something in it, right? When you have that near-death experience, you have a death experience in your instance for 26 seconds, I think you said, that we sometimes change our view on the world. And there's a, very well documented 5 regrets of the dying. And one of the most popular on that is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I lived a life that was true to myself and not living a life for others, being something that other people wanted me to be. And those things immediately come to mind because you had that opportunity to go, hey, am I on the right path? Actually, I'm going to fight this. But from a leadership context, actually, I think leadership first, we need to be able to lead ourselves before we can lead others. And I think a lot of people forget that. A lot of command and control leaders are, shouting out things, and actually they're not living the life or not leading from the front in the way that they expect their teams to lead. And you had to lead yourself in that moment. I think the last thing I wanted to mention is I'm a big believer that a thought is one of the most powerful things in the universe. And you had that thought of going, you know what? I'll go through this. I'm going to be fine. And you had a lot of things going on in that moment. And for a lot of people in an HR context, now if we bring this back into the world of human resources, comparison is a thief of joy. And I think that's not always great in the world of HR. We look at others and think, oh, but I'm not like them, and that makes me feel worse. And you've gone through a hell of a circumstance here. But for a lot of individuals working in HR, maybe they've lost a parent, maybe they've overcome different types of odds and different types of situations. Each time, these are things that make us more resilient. So obviously, I'm going to go into your podcast in a moment, which really brings this to life. But how's this really shaped your understanding of things like purpose, resilience, and leadership? And how have you seen it also shape others in a similar way that maybe have gone through not necessarily the same experience, but other life-changing ones?
Well, in terms of shaping others, I always guide people to reflect on their lives. And this is what I've done for myself to figure out my own purpose and help other people figure out their purpose. But what I just shared was such a small piece of my story. I continued for years to get sick with various things. I got ulcerative colitis, and then I ended up getting diagnosed. Well, they thought I had MS, and then they told me it looked like it was ALS. And then at that point is when I just kind of went off on my own and started doing my own research and finding a way to survive. And I think everything led me up to my survival. All those difficulties that I had gone through. I also struggled with severe depression when I was younger, but going through all that trained me and made me more resilient and ready to survive and fight. So when the doctor came in and said, "Have you heard of ALS?" that was kind of the end for me, where I was like, I'm done with what you're offering, because you're offering nothing but testing, and you're doing these tests that are showing that, yes, my body is doing exactly what I'm telling you. I'm telling you I can't breathe, and I can't swallow, and I can't walk. I'm telling you all these things, and you're just saying yes, yes, yes. And I needed solutions. And so I had to become very solution oriented. And I started doing research on my own, and I found another doctor, or I shouldn't say another doctor, but I found a doctor that was also diagnosed with ALS. And I shouldn't say also diagnosed, because I was not officially, but that's where it was headed. And he was diagnosed with ALS. And so he found out he actually had Lyme disease, started treating the Lyme, began to walk again, and got well. And so then I went down that path as well. I found out I had Lyme. I found out I had mold in my urine. I had heavy metals. I had all these toxic things going on within my body. And so then I began to survive. But what I guide people to do is to figure out your purpose. Look at everything that's happened in your life. All these things have happened for a reason, and they all compound to make up your purpose. There's no way these things just happen to just happen. I don't believe that. It wouldn't even make sense, right? How could you really walk in your purpose and do it well if you don't have the experience? And so look back on all these life experiences that you've been put through. And obviously for me, it's health stuff. And so now it's made me believe that there's no way this was just for one person. And I know that I need to push out, and I need to share this on a greater scale. And so that's why I do the podcast and the YouTube show, is to really bring hope for people that their lives can be different, and the complexities of life are actually not that complex, and there's always a way to figure it out. So that's why I share all these different stories on my platform, so people can get a whole toolbox of things that they can push through things.
Now, of course, your platform is Wake Up Your Soul, and it's really, you talk about stories where people have turned pain into power, and we'll go into that in just a minute. I have a question that just popped into my mind when you were giving that response on leadership and resilience. And it might be slightly a confronting question, but I think you'll know where I'm going. You've got much more experience than I do in this realm because of all the guests you've had on your show. But often when we hear these stories, we think, oh, you'll get pity, or you'll get sympathy and all these things. And I'm thinking about my own stories as well in my life. And we often think that these are negative things. But often, if we put this into an HR context, just so people can get on board here, let's say you've been made redundant. Now, often when that happens, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen. You're worried you might lose your house, your financial security. And obviously that can lead to financial stress, can lead to mental health issues and all these kind of things. And we panic. But then 3 months later, they find a better job or a different job, and they say that redundancy was the best thing that ever happened to me. Now, I'm not saying that going through all that trauma and pain was the best thing that happened to you necessarily, but because of where it's led you in your journey, because of everything you've discovered, because it's forced you, I guess, to look inward and really discover more about your own purpose and how you can help other people find theirs. How do you view your story? Do you view it negatively or positively? Or is that the wrong question?
No, I mean, it's a fair, valid, great question. And I've talked about this in one of my episodes, and I kind of battled it out with my guest because she had gone through cancer and was still mad about it. And for people that are really into the health stuff, we know that the frequency that we're holding within our body and our emotions can cause illness and disease within our bodies. And so I really do believe it's important to hold on to a positive mindset, but also not a fake positive mindset. Like, it has to be genuine. But for the guest that I had, she spoke about it, and she was happy about the journey of the cancer because it led her to greater connections with family and all sorts of awakenings, but she was still mad about that. And I kept questioning her and asking her, but why? Because it led you to such a great place. Why are you still so mad about it? And I always remind people that we get to choose. We really do get to choose the emotional state that we take on from an event, a circumstance. The outcome is created in our mind. It's whatever we want to believe it is. And so for me, everything that I've been through, I'm not mad about any of it. I'm really grateful because it has taught me so much. And I have 2 little girls who I can see how much everything I've been through has helped. So, I mean, this is a little bit random, but something along the way I randomly did at one point. I used to be a teacher and did that sort of thing. So I actually got trained working with kids with processing disorders, and I had a tutoring business for kids with processing disorders. And I did that for a brief period. And I remember later thinking, like, why did I even do that? I mean, that was cool, but that didn't last long. And then so that was that. And then here we are, fast forward to my daughter just probably a year ago. I was having to dive in with her and help her using all the tools that I had used because nobody was helping her in the way that she needed. And so eventually everything comes to light as to why you've experienced it. But for me, everything I went through, I don't see it as negative, and I really believe in finding the positive in it. And I know that might sound simple to just like, oh, let me find how it's positive. But I tell people, if you think about something and you want to hold a negative belief around it, you're holding a negative frequency and you're holding on to that. And that's really not going to serve you well. So how can you find something positive about it? And, when it comes to things in the workplace, something that's really angering you and frustrating you, that's okay. You can't just immediately let go and say, I'm okay with it. I understand that. That's not reality. But you can look at the flip side and really balance out your brain. And that's what it's really all about, is having that balance and understanding of, that was a really frustrating experience. That was stressful. That was hard. That can be a valid emotion, but also take yourself to the flip side of it. Why was that good for you? That stressful, that hard? Why was that actually good for you? How is it going to be good for you? And that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you mentioned anger there, and anger, I think, is such an important emotion. It tells us something's wrong. But I think it's only becomes important if we do the work you've just mentioned, which is that self-reflective work. So why am I angry? What is it that's really causing it for me in here? It may not be that thing right now, but we need to, not everyone necessarily takes the opportunity to do that reflective work. And I think that's something your podcast does so well, because you take your guests through a journey. You listen to the stories of where they've turned tragedy into triumph, and you have to go on the entire journey to understand it. I'm an athlete, so I do a lot of Ironman races, and often people will see the bit at the end, which is finishing a finish line in whatever time. They don't see the year's worth of training that goes into it. And that's the triumph comes if you're an athlete. And there's loads of other stories in work and people that get to the top of chief HR officer, whatever it might be. But why do you think so many of us need to wake up? And I mention that because your podcast is called Wake Up Your Soul. And what is usually holding people back from doing so?
I think people need to wake up. I mean, it's my own opinion, obviously, but I think I look around the world and there's a lot of mental health issues going on, and there seems to be a lot of sadness, and there just seems to be a lack of caring for self. And I see this a lot in conversations with people. I've had so many conversations with people where we just start talking about their lives and they always walk away with some sort of aha moment and saying, thank you, I hadn't thought about it that way. And so that was kind of part of also what led me to doing what I'm doing, was realizing that was something I was really good at, is having conversations with people and getting them to that place of that aha moment. So I really do think that we do need to wake up a little bit, because I look at the direction of the world and it's going in a very interesting place, if you ask me. Yeah. Was the second part of that was asking how how they can get there?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's one of those things where we often hear you need to wake up, but then people don't know how to take that first step. As something a good friend of mine called Trayton, who's been on my show, said, Nick, you don't need to be ill to get better. And that's always stayed with me. We think that, we take some things like coaching. We often go and get coaching when there's something wrong. But if we had it before something went wrong, it may never have gone wrong in the first place. But it's kind of that place in the middle where people can wake up now, but we feel like we need a life-affirming change in order to take that step. Of course, we don't need that. We can wake up at any time we want. Well, that would be my personal view.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I always guide people to create a movie in their mind of their life and imagine, and you can continue to imagine up to present day or even beyond, but just quiet your mind, lay down, close your eyes and imagine your life as this movie. And are you smiling watching it back? Are you enjoying it? Or are you kind of watching it just with a straight face like, ugh, that was a rough go? If you're not enjoying what you're seeing of your life, let that be your wake up call to start making a change. And to start making a change, start leaning into the things that you value. And this goes into just personal life, but even into the workplace as HR, as you're guiding people. What do people value? Because at the end of the day, when people go home, they want to feel happy, right? We want to feel happy. We want to feel fulfilled and like we enjoyed our day. And the best way that you can assure that people are enjoying their day and their time is that they're feeling valued and their values are being fulfilled. And so you need to question your employees and you need to question yourself. What do I value? What things are really of high value to me? And how can I achieve those and find that in my life so that you can start filling your day with the things that bring you the most joy? And then people ask, well, how do I think about the things that I value the most? Look at questions like, if you were stranded on a desert island, what 3 things would you bring? What 3 things are the most important for you to bring? If you had 90 days left to live, what would you do with those 90 days? What are the most organized things in your home? Because that's what you care about the most. The things that you're keeping organized are the things that you care about most. And so when we start looking at the things that we value, we can start changing our lives more.
I like that. And I'm always losing my wallet, which gives me a little bit of comfort now that I know that I don't value money that importantly. That's a good thing. It drives my wife nuts, but it's a good thing. I know obviously you work with a lot of business leaders as well. There's a lot of very, very highly successful performers that listen to this podcast. And I know that you've helped a lot of the leaders that you've worked with develop intuition as a real practical leadership skill. And I don't think it's a skill that's discussed enough, and particularly in that top level where we get to the top and you become a chief HR officer, and sometimes we can feel very lonely at the top. Everyone's asking us for questions. We've got no real peers to kind of work with, and we get it. We feel in ourselves that something's off, and we don't know how to sort of manage that. So, what kind of advice would you give to those leaders who feel it in their bodies? You can sense it inside. The anxiety often will show itself with an elevated heart rate, sweaty palms, that knot in your stomach, but they don't know how to act upon it.
Or they don't know how to act upon their intuition, is what you're saying?
Yeah. I guess, you mentioned a moment ago about values, and I was thinking a lot of people live small, but they don't need to. It could be maybe it's a relationship to make it so it's really easy to understand from an audience perspective. You feel intuitively the relationship's wrong. There's a fear that kind of stops you from making the changes that intuitively you need to make, but there's a fear attached. Sometimes it's easier to stay small. It's easier not to do that thing. You see a problem at work, it's not right, intuitively it's wrong, but you neither don't think it's your place, or you don't have the fear stops you. How do we get over that barrier? Because you've had to show incredible bravery to get through your situation, and that can't have been easy. Attention payroll leaders, if you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favorite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the first place I always tell people just push through it. Just push through it and see how you feel, because I know it's hard and it's easier said than done, but this is where I share these stories that you can listen to and you can reflect and think about, okay, well, if they were able to push through that, I will. And just start pushing through small things. So put yourself in these uncomfortable places so you can start pushing through a little bit in small ways. And then you can build up that confidence within yourself that you have this ability to push through things. And as far as tapping into intuition, I mean, that's a whole thing of training and getting yourself there, right? I can simply answer it, but also it's not something people should expect overnight. We're never going to just wake up and have all these intuitive hits immediately. But I have to remind people that how much intuition can really step in when you have all this mind chatter going on and all your personal thoughts and all these beliefs going on. And so sometimes people question and wonder, how can they give themselves that quiet mind? Because yes, as business leaders, you're overwhelmed and you have a million things going on in your brain all at once, right? And so the best thing I recommend, it might sound a little crazy, is just like lighting a candle or a fireplace and just kind of staring off into the flame and just letting your mind blank out for a little bit and feeling within your body what it feels like to kind of relax for a minute and have that blank space for those intuitive thoughts to step in. And I think set the intention. And when I say set the intention, it's really all about putting that energy out to the universe and even in your own mind that's what you're seeking an answer for, so that you're going to start to think about it and it will come to you.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because something that I found really interesting in your work, and there's a couple of things I still want to bring up because I think they're really powerful. One of them is I guess I'll call it the psychology of silence. And it's something that I don't think in any leadership course I've ever been on, really, it's talked about enough, that actually it's okay sometimes to be silent, to reprogram our fears in our minds, and just be at one with ourselves. We're so busy, and obviously the more success we sometimes get in our work lives, if you're working in human resources, the busier you become, the more projects, the more plates you have to start spinning. But I know that something you talk about a lot is the power of the mindset. And if we can get that mindset right, we can bounce back stronger, and we can help prevent some of the things we see a lot in this industry, which is burnout and stress and all the things that ultimately lead to presenteeism or absence and other things like that. Tell us a little bit more about why you think that's so powerful and why it's such an underutilized, I guess, strategic opportunity for us to become better leaders.
Shifting your mindset is going to help you become a better leader, and giving yourself that blank space is going to help you become a better leader as well, because you're going to start tapping into things that are outside of the textbooks and all the rules and the guidance that you're following. Because typically you're going to do all the things that legal and HR are saying you have to do, right? Like you have that, but you still can apply all those rules in a way that is more relatable to that person and feels a little less sterile and cold, and doesn't feel like you're approaching it just from the book, like following all the rules. And when somebody is trying to help somebody or guide somebody through a struggle at work and they're using this, here's the rules, here's the, follow this, do that. It just feels very impersonable, and you don't feel like that person actually cares about you. So you got to find a way. And like I was saying before, you have to figure out values of the people that you're working with, because that's what matters most to them. And when you can touch them in a place that feels very personal and like you actually care, they're going to hear you 10 times louder than if you're not touching them on a very personal level. And so when you give yourself that quiet space in your mind, you're able to actually think about somebody else and think about, just lean into what you know about that person and imagine how the situation and everything's going to be perceived by them. It's very different than just go, go, go in your brain of what do I have to do? What do I need to say? This is what I need to say to them. Personalize it. Take that time to come back and personalize it and think about the mindset piece of what kind of mindset do I have and do they have, and how can we meet in the middle?
You mentioned the word stories. I think storytelling is another really underutilized strength, certainly in modern business at the minute. I'd love to know what, some of the stories you've heard on your podcast that really had an impact on you. Obviously had an impact on your guests, but the ones that you sat back and went, wow, have you any you'd like to share that maybe we can try and direct some of our audience to if they feel equally as inspired?
So a couple that, they all stand out, but there's the one, he was buried alive in an avalanche. And that one gives me chills. The doctors wanted to pull the plug. They were telling the family he's not going to make it. And the family had a lot of faith and they didn't want to pull the plug, and they ended up praying and having this worldwide, I think, prayer chain essentially happening and asking people to start praying. And he started to twitch and move and things. And eventually he came back. And so that was a really powerful story. But also there was the Texas flood story that I did, which was also, that one left me for days just really sitting deeply with myself. So that might be a really good one for people to listen to.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that story?
Yeah. So this family, they were on a trip and they were traveling. I think it was like 5 a.m. and it was still dark out, and they hit water, and it was a bridge where there's never water. It's very rare. And so it was not expected, and they couldn't see because it was too dark out. And so immediately their van was swept into the water. They got out of the van, everybody got out, but everybody was swept into this river of very rapid water. I can't remember if it was like 30, 40 mile an hour waters. It was going very rapid. And some of them got out pretty quickly and then some did not. But this story is just incredible because even though the family did lose their daughter, the strength that they have had to even speak out. They shared this story with me very shortly after it happened. And to just even be able to keep going after watching that happen. They watched their kids go down the water or down the river. And then they found their other children. They even had another child with them that was not their own. And she was okay. But my favorite part of this, which even if you're not religious, still you have to think like, wow, the one little girl who was kind of dabbling into her own spirituality, she had a Bible in her backpack, and this backpack went into the water, but it was recovered and it was muddy and it was nasty, this backpack. And when she opened it up, she leaves, debris, all that. But there was a Bible in there, and she opens up the Bible and there was not a drop of water on any single page. None of the pages. And so it was fascinating. But this story has so much to it. There's so many layers. Before the flood happened, there was this little girl that drew a picture of a girl. I think she's like holding her hand out of the water and Jesus is coming down for her, something like that. But this happened right before the flood. The girl drew the picture, had no idea why she was inspired to draw the picture. And then she saw the parents shortly after the flood and said, I think this is for you. And so there just were a lot of things. And even during this, the mom was swept under, and she said she looked up and she saw a light, even though there was no light. It was not daylight. And she saw a light and she went up, and then she was pulled out of the water, or she wasn't pulled out, but like she pulled herself up, by following the light. She got to the top of the water and she came out. But throughout their story, there's just so many pieces that show us there's a whole nother layer to the world that we're living in. There really is this divine other dimension. And so that part is really beautiful. And I think it brings you a lot of peace and knowing that there is another side that we will reach at some point, but also knowing that we can lean into that guidance here if we just give ourselves that quiet space to allow messages to come in.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Obviously that tragic, but equally, as the things you call out, I think, this is the thing where I think whether you're an HR leader or whoever you are, often we try and control too much. Control the controllables by all means, but the world is a huge and unexplainable place in many, many ways. And sometimes we try and keep hold of everything. We'll drive ourselves crazy because it's not possible. And you can try and predict how someone will react. And you can try and, I always give an example of a story that if you're driving and someone cuts you up at a junction, which happens a lot here in the UK, all right, we have a choice in that moment. Usually we'll get really, really angry and we'll go, how dare you? You're driving really erratically. But actually, if you were suddenly to discover that person that cut you up was rushing to the hospital because wife was about to give birth, the whole context of that story, you go, oh God, I nearly hit that person. Oh God, I feel so sorry. Now it's fine. And we create these stories in our minds that we can sometimes have a choice. We don't always know how that's going to play out. So we have a choice to say, are we going to be angry with that individual? Or do you want to create a better narrative in our minds to say, you know what? Yeah, they cut me up, but let's hope that they needed to get somewhere more urgently than I did, in a very lesser example maybe. But I think it's, and your podcast brings this to life. You've got so many phenomenal guests across a whole plethora of different stories of absolute, struggle and triumph, that whatever you are going through and you're listening to this, whether it's a leadership challenge, whether it's a legal or incarceration or whatever it is, you've got a story for everyone there so far. And I think it's very hard not to be inspired by the interviews that you've taken place, as well as your own story, of course. What's your bigger goal then with all these stories? Where do we want to take this next for you?
I really want to take this to the largest platform. I want to take it to TV. I want it to be something very accessible. And I mean, I know podcasts are accessible, but some people, they like to have it on TV. So I'm trying to put it on every platform possible. And you can stream it, obviously. You can stream your YouTube on your TV, but I'm trying to get it to be something that is picked up by TV so that I don't have to support the cost of it, but I can have it filmed in a better way, and I can have guests daily. If it's like a daily talk show, something that people kind of tune into every morning to just get a little bit inspired for their day and have that mindset shift, just like you were saying. I actually went through a very similar experience. I know you were kind of hypothetical with that, but this was after all the things that I have been through, and I've struggled. And when I've been in those really difficult days, my world gets really, really quiet. And you start looking at the world in a very different way. You look at people just passing you by and you think, wow, like, lucky them to feel so good in their body right now. You just, all the things that you take for granted, you have such an appreciation for. But there was this time where this guy, he completely cut me off the road, or on the freeway going 70 miles an hour, and just essentially pushed me off of the road. I was not even on the freeway anymore. I was on the side of the freeway. And so I called the company that he worked for because he was in a work truck. And I actually genuinely was not even mad. I called and I said, I just got ran off the road by one of your employees. I'm just letting you know because I don't know what's going on with him. And I had this whole story that I made up in my mind. I was like, I don't know if he's got a wife that just got diagnosed with cancer or what's happening, but he's clearly not in the right headspace. And we have to understand and remember that, like, we're not always in the right headspace. What's going on? And so for me, when I've gone through all these difficult things, I remind myself when situations like that arise, I don't know what that person is going through right now. When somebody's being rude or cutting you off, or even at the store, if somebody's pushing or whatever it be, you just don't know what they're going through. And you have to believe that people don't genuinely want to be a jerk, right? No, I don't think they want to be that, but it's coming about because of something that they're struggling and they're going through. So you got to just empathize with that and let it go. Like, I feel bad that they're in that place right now, and I wish them well. And I'm going to move on and hold myself in this happier place. I
absolutely love that. I mean, I'm a big believer in just be more kind. Everyone's going through something, right? And you bring those some things to life on your show, and you do it very, very eloquently and very, very well. And we have our struggles, and it's not always about a comparative struggle either. The struggle is true for you in that moment, and it's just be more kind, as you say. If someone's showing a slightly different, personality to usual, maybe they need a hand over around their shoulder rather than being called to account sometimes. I'm keen to, I guess, finish today's show with some of your advice on how our listeners can really start to strengthen their intuition and their self-awareness. Are there one or two kind of daily practices that you can recommend they start implementing right away that perhaps can just start them on that first step, to help them take that first step?
like we were talking about before, just that quiet, giving yourself that quiet space in your mind, but journaling and doing that reflective piece, because we talked about this, that is key. That is the biggest place you can start. Start having that reflection on your life and start putting pieces together and understanding. And when people are wanting to build up their intuition, I tell them, look back and reflect on moments where you had these aha moments, or you think back and you were like, I knew it. Everybody has been through moments in life where they just knew it. Like, I should have done that. They say that to themselves, right? I should have done this. I knew that was going to happen. Go back to those moments and ask yourself, how did you know? Like, what was that feeling inside of your body, so that you can start leaning into that feeling when you start to feel it more the next time and the next time. You'll start feeling it when you have that I knew it moment, and you're going to start to recognize it a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. And then if for the leaders that are leading their teams, then if they could take one step towards building, I guess I'll call it a more conscious, emotionally intelligent workplace, what could those first steps be?
Going back to what I was saying about values, if you want this to be a more conscious place where you're really thinking about what you're doing and how you're intentionally helping others, don't just do it to teach them the ways and the things that they know. Teach them in a way, and teach everybody differently, because everyone is different, but guide them in a way that meets them where they're at and what their needs are and their values are.
Yeah, I love that. I remember when sadly I lost my dad last year to cancer, and I was fortunate enough to be with him when he passed, but we had a conversation, and it's about the ghost that comes to visit you. I said to my dad, is there anything that's coming to visit you now that you wish you'd done? You know, those regrets. Is there a book you wish you'd written? Is there someone you wish you'd said sorry to, or anything like that? Anything I can do to make that happen, just so you when you leave this world, which was inevitable because of the stage you was at, that will just let you leave the world a little bit more peacefully. And I think sometimes, like, you don't want that to be the opportunity, though. I think there's an opportunity here that if you've got that on your mind, that's not, preventing you from living a life that's authentic, that's holding that weight inside. You mentioned earlier, we take all this on into our bodies, and if there's that call you can make, or that apology you can make, or that forgiveness you can give, whatever it is, it's just going to allow you to live a little bit more freely. Like, don't wait for the life defining moments to take that decision. There's an opportunity to do it now. And if you're not living, I'm bringing this back down to your values, in a life that's in alignment with your values, which is one of the 5 biggest regrets of the dying anyway, there's an opportunity to do something about it. And challenge your fears.
We don't want to have regrets.
No.
And just live in that what if I just did it? And I think that's something I've always been good at, is pushing myself to the what if. Like, even though I'm scared to do this, what if I do it? And what if it works out? You don't know until you try. And you don't know till you fail also. So it's good either way.
Yeah. My friend always says the word fail is first attempt in learning. We win or learn. First attempt in learning is quite nice. Yeah. And someone first said to me as well, but so you mentioned the word beliefs earlier, but he said to me, if you break that word down, it's the word lie surrounded by BS. So you can change those, which I thought was quite nice. Well, let's open the HR L&D vault. These are 3 short, sharp questions for our audience, and back into the world of human resources here. But one piece of advice you would give to HR L&D leaders who want to unlock their potential?
Make yourself be different than every other leader out there, right? So this is where it's great if you can start tapping into your intuition, giving yourself that blank mind, that blank space, because you're going to start receiving information and being able to guide people, like we've been talking about, guide people in the way that's going to best serve them and give you a stronger connection with the people that you're working with. And you're going to end up feeling more fulfilled at the end of the day too, because they are going to appreciate your guidance 10 times. And same for them. They're going to be happier. You're going to be happier. And so I think that's a really great way for people to start.
Love that. Love that. One thing you now know that you wish you'd known when you started your career.
Trust myself. Trust myself. Always trust myself.
Love that. That's powerful. Mm-hmm. And last but not by no means least, one book, or in your instance, could be a story, could be a podcast interview or quote that's really shaped your philosophy, either on leadership or on purpose or something similar.
Like I had touched on, the biggest thing that really has changed my whole life world perspective is understanding that we are in control and we are in charge of the emotions that we attach to an event. And that really is what shaped and shifted my whole world. And when I was really sick and going through all those things and struggling mentally and all that, just realizing that I have this choice, this power, this control over the thoughts, that really changed my world. And when we start changing our thoughts, we also start changing the cells within our body, and just learning all of that was a really huge game changer for me.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a great Sydney Banks that said, every feeling lives in the shadow of a thought. If we change the way we think, we can change the way we feel. And I thought, that's always something that stuck with me. And I think your story is one which I'm hoping, well, I have no doubt will inspire our listeners. Certainly, if you want to find out more, there's something you can do, listeners. If you love this show, you can do me a really good favor here. You can go and join and listen to Andrea's show. I'll put a link in the show notes. Wake Up Your Soul. I guarantee you'll find a story that resonates with you. And I know that we can help Andrea here to realize your ambition of getting on TV and getting this story out to bigger masses. So if you're part of this audience, please go and become a part of Andrea's as well. I'm sure she'll really appreciate that. I think we've been a really interesting discussion today, talking about the link between emotional healing, purpose, performance, the power of silence, psychology. That sometimes the things that knock us down don't have to be the things that keep us down, and it can turn into something of beauty. So thank you ever so much for joining me today on the HR L&D podcast. And as I said, the link to your podcast will be in the show notes. But also, if you have an opportunity, go to AndreaLynnIntuitive.com and you can find out more about your coaching services as well. If you want a couple of minutes to talk about your website and some of the other services you provide, please do take the floor.
Yeah, people can find me on Instagram as well and connect with me pretty easily through there, Andrea Lynn Intuitive. And then the YouTube channel is Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea Lynn. And then it streams on all major podcast platforms. So I just appreciate if people go take a listen, take a like, subscribe, all that. That really helps.
Absolutely. If you get a chance, do that on this show as well. But listen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you ever so much for joining me today on the HR L&D podcast. I've been your host. My name is Nick Day, and I look forward to being the next episode real soon. Andrea Lynn, thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
Deal is the all-in-one platform to hire, manage, and pay your global team, giving HR one place to work instead of juggling disconnected systems. From onboarding to offboarding, Deal brings payroll, compliance, and even IT access together across 150 plus countries, all on infrastructure they built themselves. That means HR isn't wrestling with logins, tabs, and tools all day long. Book your demo today at DEEL.com/NickDayHR. That's deal.com/NickDayHR.